Okay, so it's good for really testing request response pairs. That's kind of how I call it. It's really, in my opinion, more of a server-side test than it is client-side. They're exceptional as a part of a load test. They're for black box testing. Again, you don't need to have an intimate knowledge of what's going on with the code. They're also good for testing server response times. So if you want to write a bunch of web performance tests and automate them just to validate that your application isn't slowing down or going below some threshold, some service level agreement or something like that, they're good for that. They're also good for testing the old style ASMX web services. Okay. And then for the demo part, I'm going to bring the load testing into this as well. So load testing are good for web server load testing. So whether that's a web server or web services that you're testing, it's good for that. It's good for things like capacity testing. How many I'm going to create a step pattern. I'm going to ramp up the users until I no longer meet my SLA. You can do that with the load testing. It's good for soak testing. If I run my application for 72 hours, am I losing memory? Things like that. Stress testing. If I run my site with 10% more than active users, am I going to be able to handle that? Or at what point am I going to break? And how am I going to break? It's good for that. Or spike testing. 8 a.m. in the morning when 500 users come and log on within 5 minutes. Can I handle that? All scenarios that are relatively easy to build up in the load test. When don't you use them? Again, non-HTTP scenarios. Okay, so I'm gonna shortchange this one in the demo. There's not a whole lot new. I'm just kind of going to give you a feel for what the workflow is with this and point out just a couple of things. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project, add a new project. Web and load test project. Click OK. Right click, add web performance test. And again, it comes up with a recorder here. So what do I want to do? This time it doesn't matter what shortcut I use at all because I'm not recording any of the interaction with the user interface. All I'm recording is HTTP, right? So I can click this shortcut. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do my, let's do my edit employee. Go in, click my employee, edit, zone 2. I'm going to say, yeah, zone 2. This is something I know is unique. And that's it. Okay, keep it simple. All right, so the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to rerun what was just recorded, Visual Studio. And the reason it's going to do that is it's trying to detect things, something called a dynamic parameter. And that's, for example, a session ID. If you're passing session ID, the web performance test needs to know that this is a dynamically generated ID and that it's going to have to capture it each time, right? So by rerunning it, it says, hey, I know last time session ID was 1, 2, 3. This time it's 4, 5, 6. I know that I need to treat this dynamic parameter differently. And it's all hidden for you, so you don't really have to worry too much about it. But it's fairly common it's somewhat common, I should say, to have to troubleshoot that once in a while. Okay, so what happened for me? The web test, it goes in, it created all of my, it captured all of my requests here, and then it figured out that I had to figure out anything interesting on these. ID. Okay. So it figured out that I needed the ID on my last request here, I needed a form post parameter to send the ID of the address or of the employee details that I just edited. So it automatically went in, created an extraction rule. It said, hey, there's this thing called hidden field 1. Extract that, put it in a context parameter so that I can use it in a future request. So it's doing all that stuff for me. And if you go through and run this, a couple of key things I just want to quickly point out. So if you go through and run this, down here, if things pass, they're going to be green. If things fail, they're going to be red. One of the more common things you'll see here is object move to here. All that is a response.redirect. So if you drill into the request, you're going to see where you were sent. Super critical to understand this. This web browser tab, it's not a full-blown browser. This is an approximation. No JavaScript is running. You'll never see ActiveX in here. You'll never see Silverlight in here, nothing like that. So you don't want to get too thrown if what you see in the web browser is not, the web browser window is not what you expect. You're gonna, even though it looks funny, things may still be correct. Okay, so you can, it's really helpful. You can dig into here and you can look at all the details of your request and what was sent back to you. Here's all my information. So this is so that's really helpful for troubleshooting problems. Just to let's say I want to go in and do a quick validation. Again, I recommend probably doing something like using coded UI rather than this. But if you want to, how would you go about doing that? I'm going to do a very simple validation. I'm going to say look for the task, look for the text, zone 2, and I'm going to ignore case because I don't remember how I cased it. Well, there was zone 2. Actually, let's see. Let's make it fail. Just show you what it looks like when it fails. Look for the text zone 3. Rerun it. This time we get a failure. Details. Couldn't find zone 3. Right. So then I can go to my response. I can dig through here and say, oh, zone 3. I thought it was supposed to be in there, and I say, nope, there's zone 2. Okay, that's what I needed to be. Okay, so that's web performance test. And so doing validations is definitely not the sweet spot here. So I'm going to delete that one from my load test. But what is a good idea is to go through and say, okay, this request, I've promised my customer that they'll get this response within 2 seconds, 90% of the time, or whatever it is. So what is a good idea to go through on these requests is to go through and set response times where appropriate. So your key requests that you're really concerned about performance, go set your response times. Now, what I want to do, I'm going to save that. Hopefully be moving on to unit test in just 5 minutes here. Save that. Now I'm going to right click, and this time I'm going to add one more. Nope, I'm going to use okay. So I just went to the project that I pre-recorded when I was proving all this out. So now I've got 2 different web performance tests. One edits the zone for an employee, and the other creates a new ticket, right? Now I want to create a load test. So I say add load test. All right, and this is kind of wizard driven, but to modify it, you don't necessarily have to use the wizard. There's just so many different properties and things to look through. I'd spend 2 hours if I was trying to explain everything available. So I'm going to go fairly quick, but it's just wizard driven. I'm going to create a load test. I'm going to call this my most common scenario. Think times are important. I was sitting here talking while I was recording the scenario where I changed that zone, and those timings were being recorded with me. So generally speaking, you want to use think times. Your normal human user interacting with your site obviously is going to need time to think. They're going to need time to read a paragraph, think about the answer, type it in. Normally, you do want to use think times. I'm going to skip it this time. And normally, all of your customers don't do it exactly 5 seconds here and 2 seconds there. So my opinion is the best setting here is user think times distributed, using the normal distribution. That's just going to make the test a little more realistic. So not every user staring at the screen, just 5 seconds, then typing a word, then hitting enter. Okay, so this will get you a little more realistic load test.